So in this video, I'm going to show you how to run an independent samples t-test. And so what you'll see is I have SPSS open and my data already loaded. And in this data, each row represents one district. So this is district level data. The data contains school districts from two states, New Jersey and New York, and from the year 2016. And so let's say that we have a research question about district size, and we want to investigate whether school districts in New Jersey and New York are of different size, say for instance. And so one way we can look at that is just by looking at enrollment. So you want to see, is the average enrollment of school districts in New Jersey different from the average enrollment of school districts in New York? So then what we can do is use an independent samples t-test to investigate that. So to do that, we're going to go up here to Analyze, then down to Compare Means, and then over here to Independent Samples t-test, and then going to just click that, and then I'm going to clear some options here from doing this earlier. But what you'll see looks like this. And again, if you need to resize this box, you can do that by just dragging the corner out. I always like to make it as big as possible so that you can see the whole variable name here. And so since we want to look at enrollment, so that's the variable that we want to test, so we highlight enrollment, move it over here into the test variable. If you wanted to run t-tests, essentially comparing New York and New Jersey across a bunch of different variables, you can do that just by adding more variables over here into your test variables. But for right now, I'm just going to show you how to do a t-test on one variable because it simplifies the output that we're going to see. And since we want to compare school districts enrollment across New York and New Jersey, we need to take state name here and declare that as our grouping variable. So since t-tests are for when we want to compare a continuous or a scale variable across two groups, so we're going to make enrollment our test or our scale variable. That's what we want to compare. And then our grouping variable, these are the two groups that we want to compare. And you'll see that down here, where we would normally click OK to run, we're not able to do that right now. And that's because what we have to do is go into Define Groups. So we click Define Groups, and then you'll see that this is still from when I had run this before. But when you click Define Groups, what will come up is that these will be empty. And so what we need to do is declare to SPSS what the groups are that we want to run, that we want to compare or use to compare enrollment. And so in this case, we're using the variable state name. And what you can see off to the side here is, New Jersey is abbreviated NJ, New York is abbreviated NY. There are other ways this could be stored, so you need to know how your data are coded. So what I'm going to do is I will just put New Jersey in here, and I'll put New York right here. And here the order doesn't really matter. So once we've got those two in there, I click Continue. Then we see that New Jersey and New York are down here with state name. And now OK lights up as blue, so we could run that. One other thing that I'll point out really quickly is that even if you have a variable, your grouping variable contains more than just two values, that's still okay. You can still do a t-test, and just when you go into Define Groups, you'll just declare to SPSS what the two groups are that you want to compare. So like for instance, you can see kind of below the box here. So this is a variable that has the urbanicity of the setting where this district is located. So what that means is this district right here is located in a rural setting, this is in a suburban setting, another rural district, a city. And so let's say that you wanted to compare the size for suburban districts and city districts. You would just, when you do grouping variables, you would just type in that you're going to use this variable, which is labeled up here, urban centric locale, and then you would just define your groups as those two. So that would be what you do if you're going to use a variable that has more than two categories. And then we're ready to just click OK. And then we get our output. And so we see that there are two tables that SPSS spits out for us. The top table here is basically our descriptive statistics table. So there's this variable here, it says enrollment. or this column here, it says enrollment, that's the variable that we were using, our test variable. And then here it says state name, so this is our grouping variable. So the top row here is going to tell us the descriptives for school districts in New Jersey. The bottom row is going to tell us descriptives for school districts in New York. And scrolling across here, we can say that in this data set, for this year, there are 629 school districts in New Jersey. The average enrollment, student enrollment in New Jersey school districts is 2197.31. There's the standard deviation of that mean, and then here's the standard error. And then we could do the same thing for school districts in New York by just interpreting this bottom row. And so for this t-test, what we want to do is we're comparing these means, and we want to see, like, we can look at this and we can say, oh, okay, well, there's a difference of about 372 students in terms of average enrollment. So it looks like New Jersey's school districts are a little bit larger. And again, this does not include New York City, because that would be quite an outlier. So it looks like there's a difference of about 372 students, but we don't know if that difference is statistically significant, or if we would just say, like, that's just just sort of some random variation that we're seeing there. So what we can do is we can scroll down here, or look down here, where it says independent samples t-test. And so you'll see there's a lot of cells in this table, and we're only going to look at about half of them, really about a fourth of them. So what we're focused on is this right. So we'll start here where it says enrollment. Then you'll see there's two rows where it says equal variance is assumed and equal variance is not assumed. What we're going to worry about here is equal variance is assumed. So we're not going to worry about that bottom row. And then we're not going to worry about these columns right here. What we're going to really look at is starting right here. So there's this column that says SIG, which is an abbreviation for significance, and then two-tailed. So what that means is this is from a two-tailed t-test. And the value of this cell is the p-value. And again, the p-value is the probability of a type 1 error. And what this tells us is we have a p-value of 0.018. And because this is less than the convention of 0.05, we would say that this difference is statistically significant. So this difference of about 372 students, which we can see here where it says mean difference, it's 371.667, is statistically significant. And then that is the information that we would need to interpret and then discuss.